The December wind sliced through my coat like it had a personal vendetta. I'd been standing outside Il Tesoro for 20 minutes, watching black cars deposit women in furs and men in cashmere, waiting for my shift supervisor to unlock the service entrance. My fingers had gone numb around the strap of my bag, the one with the fraying corner I kept meaning to sew. Nobody looked at me. That was the thing about being a server in a place like this. You existed in the negative space between their conversations, visible only when they needed something. When Marco finally appeared, cigarette dangling from his lips, he didn't apologize. VIP section tonight. Tables 12 through 15. Don't screw it up, Sierra. Sierra. My mother had named me Serafina after her grandmother in Calabria, but everyone here shortened it to something easier to bark across a kitchen. I nodded, tucking wind-shocked hair behind my ear, and followed him through the steel door into the gold-lit belly of the restaurant. The warmth hit me like a wall, not comfort, contrast, the kind that reminded you where you just been. I changed into my uniform in the basement locker room, the black fabric worn soft at the elbows, and tied the white half-apron twice because the strings had stretched. My reflection in the cloudy mirror looked tired, 26 and tired. My phone buzzed, a text from the hospice nurse. Your grandmother's asking for you, vitals stable but restless. I typed back a quick tomorrow morning, promise, and shoved the phone deep into my bag. Upstairs, the dining room shimmered. Crystal chandeliers, white tablecloths pressed with military precision, the low murmur of wealth negotiating with itself. I moved through it like a ghost, setting down water glasses, reciting specials I'd memorized in 3 languages. Table 12, a couple celebrating something that required champagne. Table 13, business associates performing civility. Table 14, a woman alone, reading, unbothered. Table 15 remained empty until nearly 9. When they arrived, the air shifted. 4 men in dark suits, moving with the kind of coordination that suggested they'd walked through doors together many times before. The maitre d' materialized, all deference and bent spine guiding them personally. I was refilling bread baskets when I felt it, the weight of someone's attention, specific and measuring. I glanced up. He sat at the head of table 15, closest to the window. Mid-30s maybe, with the kind of face that photographs well but unsettles in person. Sharp jaw, dark eyes that didn't blink as often as they should, hair pushed back in a way that suggested impatience with the entire concept of grooming rituals. His suit probably cost more than my rent. His hands, resting on the table, were clean and still. Aqua naturale, one of his companions said to me, not looking up from his phone. Subito. I nodded, turning toward the bar, but the man at the head, the one who'd been watching, spoke. His voice carried the particular texture of Milan, smooth and urban, but underneath it I caught the harder consonants of somewhere south. E per favor, dildi non tornare ogni 5 minuti come un cane affamato. Una volta basta. Tell her not to come back every 5 minutes like a hungry dog. Once is enough. His companions laughed, low and knowing. They thought I didn't understand. Everyone always thought I didn't understand. I could have let it go. Should have. Tips from table 15 would probably cover my grandmother's prescriptions for the week. But the cold from outside was still in my bones, and the text from the nurse was still burning in my pocket, and I was so tired of being invisible except when they needed me to fetch and carry and disappear on command. I set the bread basket down with deliberate care and met his eyes. Certamente, signor. Non vorrei disturber la vostra serata con la mia presenza canina, acqua per quattro, una volta sola. Forse potrei anche portare del cricket, si preferite. Certainly, sir. I wouldn't want to disturb your evening with my canine presence. Water for 4, just once. Perhaps I could also bring some kibble if you prefer. The table went silent. The man's expression didn't change immediately. It was more like watching ice crack under pressure, a hairline fracture before the break. His eyes widened fractionally, reassessing. One of his companions choked on nothing. Another leaned back in his chair, grinning with sudden delight. Madonna Santa, the grinning one said. Dante, she just. Dante, the name landed in my chest with unexpected weight. Dante Sorrentino. I'd seen it on the reservation list, had heard Marco curse about it earlier. Owner's guest, he'd said. Don't breathe wrong near that table. Dante Sorrentino raised one hand, silencing his companion without looking away from me. When he spoke again, his voice had changed registers entirely, still controlled, but with something underneath I couldn't name. Die dove say. Where are you from? My phone buzzed again in the basement, 2 floors down, but I felt the vibration anyway, phantom and urgent. Calabria, I said. My mother's from Reggio. My father was American. I'm very sorry if I've offended you, signor. I'll bring your water immediately. I didn't wait for his response. I walked to the bar with my spine straight and my hands steady, even though my heart was trying to punch through my ribs. Marco intercepted me at the service station, his face flushed. What did you say to them? Nothing, taking their water order. Zero. It's fine. It wasn't fine. I could feel Dante Sorrentino's gaze following me across the room, a pressure between my shoulder blades. I filled 4 glasses with filtered water, no ice, and carried them back on a tray, my expression professionally neutral. When I reached table 15, I distributed the glasses without meeting anyone's eyes, murmured buon appetito, and turned to leave. Aspetta, wait. I stopped, turned back. Dante was holding a business card between 2 fingers extended toward me like a dare. Your name. Serafina. I didn't take the card. Serafina. He repeated it slowly, tasting each syllable. My associate will take the osso buco. I'll have the branzino. My other guests will decide momentarily. And Serafina, he placed the card on the edge of the table, still looking at me. When you have a moment, I'd like to speak with you, privately. One of his companions muttered something about timing. Another watched me with unconcealed curiosity. The 4th had stopped pretending to look at his phone. I'm working, signor. After your shift, then, I'll wait. It wasn't a question. I left the card where it sat, took the rest of their orders, and retreated to the kitchen. My hands started shaking only when I was safely behind the swinging doors, surrounded by the crash of pans and the shouted orders and the steam that smelled like garlic and money. Marco cornered me by the walk-in. He asked for you by name when he left. Dante Sorrentino. Do you know who that is? Should I? He owns this place, and about 6 others, and Marco dropped his voice, glancing toward the dining room. Other things, the kind of things you don't ask about if you're smart. My phone buzzed again. I pulled it out finally and saw 3 missed calls from the hospice. My stomach dropped through the floor. I have to go. Your shift ends at midnight. My grandmother. I was already untying my apron, my fingers clumsy with panic. I have to go now. I didn't go back into the dining room. I grabbed my coat from the basement, my bag, my phone, and I left through the service entrance into the December wind that felt, somehow, even colder than before. The card Dante Sorrentino had offered stayed on table 15, and I told myself I'd never know what he wanted to say privately, and that was fine, that was safer, that was the smart choice. I was halfway to the bus stop when a car pulled up beside me, black, sleek, windows tinted. The back door opened, and a woman in a gray suit leaned out. Ms. Morty, Mr. Sorrentino would like to offer you a ride. He understands you have an emergency. I stopped walking, stared at her. How did you? The hospice called the restaurant when they couldn't reach you. Your supervisor mentioned you'd left upset. Mr. Sorrentino thought you might need assistance. Her expression was professionally sympathetic, but her eyes were sharp. It's a 30-minute bus ride to St. Joseph's. I can have you there in 12. I should have said no. Should have walked away, taken the bus, arrived on my own terms. But my grandmother was restless. The nurse had called 3 times, and 12 minutes versus 30 felt like the difference between goodbye and too late. I got in the car. The woman closed the door behind me and returned to the passenger seat. The driver, older, silent, with the thick neck of someone who'd done more than drive in his life, pulled smoothly into traffic. The interior smelled like leather and faintly cologne, something expensive with cedar undertones. I realized with a jolt that Dante Sorrentino was sitting in the far corner of the back seat, jacket unbuttoned, tie loosened, looking at me with that same measuring expression from the restaurant. "I didn't ask for this," I said. "No," he agreed, "but you need it." We drove in silence for 3 blocks. I watched the city slide past the tinted windows, all the late-night storefronts and empty bus shelters, and people who weren't being delivered to emergencies in cars that cost more than they'd earn in a decade. My reflection in the glass looked small and out of place. "Your grandmother," Dante said finally. "What's her condition?" "Congestive heart failure, advanced. She has maybe," my voice cracked, I steadied it, "weeks, maybe less." "Who's her cardiologist?" "She doesn't have one anymore. No insurance. The hospice provides palliative care, but—" "Names," he interrupted, pulling out his phone. "Hospice facility, her attending nurse, any specialist she saw before." "Why?" He looked up, his expression unreadable. "Because you understood what I said tonight, Serafina, and you had the spine to answer. That's rare, useful, and I pay my debts, even the ones incurred through my own stupidity." I gave him the names. I don't know why. Maybe because the alternative was silence and the smell of cedar and the weight of obligation I didn't understand. Maybe because my grandmother was dying and I was so tired of fighting alone. He typed quickly, then made a call in rapid Italian too low for me to catch completely, though I heard my grandmother's name and the phrase, priorita massima. When we pulled up to St. Joseph's Hospice, the car idled at the entrance. Dante's assistant, the woman in gray, handed me a card. Not Dante's, hers. "My direct number. Mr. Sorrentino would like to meet with you tomorrow. 2 p.m. The address is on the back." "I'm working tomorrow." "Not anymore," Dante said. "I called Marco, you're on leave, paid." I stared at him. "You can't just—" "I already did." He leaned forward slightly into the space between us, and I caught the full force of that cologne, that presence, that absolute certainty in his own authority. 2 p.m., Serafina, I have a proposal for you, one that might help your grandmother, and you can say no," he smiled, thin and knowing. "But you won't." The door opened. The driver stood waiting. I got out, clutching the assistant's card, and watched the black car disappear into the December night, swallowed by the city that had delivered me here and might, I suspected, be about to swallow me too. Inside, my grandmother was sleeping, finally peaceful. The nurse looked relieved. "She calmed down about 20 minutes ago, almost like she knew you were coming." I sat beside the bed and held Nana Alina's thin hand, feeling the papery skin and the bird-bone delicacy of her fingers, and tried not to think about cedar-scented men who owned restaurants and made calls that changed priorities and knew how to make obligation feel like opportunity. But the card was in my pocket, and 2 p.m. tomorrow was coming, and some part of me, the part that had spoken Calabrese Italian to a man who thought I was only decoration, already knew I'd go. The morning arrived gray and reluctant. I'd slept on the hospice recliner, my neck cramped and my coat pulled over me like a blanket, and woken to find Nana Elena watching me with those still bright eyes that never stopped being sharp even when the rest of her had grown so fragile. "You look like you've seen a ghost," she said in Italian, her voice crackling like old paper. "Or met a devil." "Neither," I lied, sitting up and folding the coat. "How are you feeling?" "Like I'm dying, Cara, as expected," she smiled faintly. "But less worried somehow, like something changed while I slept. You feel it too." I did, but I didn't want to. I helped her drink water, accepted weak tea from the day nurse, and spent 2 hours reading to her from the battered Dante, the poet, not the man, that lived on her bedside table. Nel mezzo del cammin di nostra vita, midway upon the journey of our life. It felt pointed, prophetic, unbearable. When she dozed off again, I checked my phone. One new message from an unknown number. Car will collect you at 1:45. Address below. M. Russ. M. Russo, the assistant in gray, the one with the sharp eyes and the direct number. I should have deleted it. Instead, I showered in the hospice's visitor bathroom, changed into the one decent dress I owned, navy, simple, bought for a funeral 2 years ago, and met the same black car outside at exactly 1:45. The driver nodded but didn't speak. No sign of Don Sorrentino. Just leather seats and silence and the city scrolling past as we drove toward a neighborhood I recognized only from magazine spreads about where successful people kept their private offices. The building was pre-war, all elegant bones and restored marble. The elevator required a key card. The driver handed me one, pressed the button for the top floor, and stayed behind as the doors closed. I watched the numbers climb, 8, 9, 10, and tried to remember how to breathe like I had choices. The elevator opened directly into a foyer. Dark wood, abstract art that probably cost more than my life. A door at the far end flanked by two men who looked like they bench-pressed compact cars for cardio. They nodded as I approached. One opened the door. Inside was an office designed by someone who understood power as something quiet and absolute. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, a desk made of wood so dark it seemed to drink light, bookshelves filled with actual books, not decorative spines but worn volumes with cracked leather and margin notes. And behind the desk, Dante Sorrentino, standing, jacket off, shirt sleeves rolled to his elbows, looking at me like I was a puzzle he'd decided to solve. Serafina, he gestured to a chair opposite the desk, thank you for coming. Did I have a choice? Always, he sat leaning back, fingers steepled. But I'm glad you made this one. Coffee, water, something stronger. Answers. He smiled, a real smile this time, brief but genuine. Fair. Here's the situation. I run several businesses, some of which require fluency in Italian for specific negotiations and translations. My usual translator is on medical leave. Indefinitely. I need someone who understands not just the language but the subtleties, the regional dialects, the things that get lost when Americans try to speak proper textbook Italian to men from Napoli or Palermo or Calabria. I finished. Exactly. He pulled a folder from his desk drawer, slid it across to me. This is a contract. Temporary position, 3 months, possibly extending to 6 depending on circumstances. You'd work as my personal translator and cultural consultant. Salary is outlined on page 2. Benefits on page 3, including health insurance that would cover my grandmother, your grandmother, the hospice costs, private specialists if you want them. A Swiss cardiologist I know owes me a favor. He's willing to consult, though at her stage, he paused, choosing words carefully. Comfort matters more than intervention, but you'd have options. I opened the folder. The salary figure made my vision blur, more than I'd made in a year at Il Tesoro. The benefits section listed coverage that included experimental treatments, private rooms, family support services. Page 4 detailed travel requirements, primarily domestic, some European trips, never more than 3 days without return. Page 5 had the clauses that made my stomach tight. Confidentiality, non-disclosure, arbitration instead of litigation. A line about discretion regarding business practices and associations. This is a very generous offer for a translator, I said slowly. You're not just a translator. What am I then? He leaned forward, elbows on the desk, his expression shifting into something more serious. You're someone who sees invisible people, who understands what it means to exist in the margins. That's valuable in my world. People underestimate the quiet ones, the service workers, the translators. They say things they shouldn't, reveal weaknesses. You'd be surprised what men confess when they think the woman taking notes doesn't matter. You want me to spy? I want you to listen, translate accurately, tell me when someone's lying in Sicilian or when a Calabrese phrase has double meaning. The rest, he gestured vaguely, you already do naturally. You watch, You assess. You survive by reading the room. And the discretion clause means you don't discuss my business outside this office. You don't testify if asked. You don't sell stories to journalists or write memoirs later. His voice hardened slightly. I protect my people, Serafina, but I need to know they'll protect me too. I looked at the contract again. 3 months, maybe 6. Enough money to quit the restaurant permanently, find something better after, maybe even take night classes like I'd always planned. Enough to give Nana Elena specialists and private rooms and comfort in her final weeks instead of the institutional kindness of an overworked hospice. What if I say no? Then you say no. I'll have Maria drive you home. Your grandmother still gets the specialist consult. I already arranged it, regardless of your decision. You keep your job at the restaurant if you want it. We never speak again. That's it. That's it. He stood, walked to the window, hands in his pockets. But I don't think you'll say no. Why? He turned, backlit by the afternoon sun, his face in shadow. Because you answered me in Italian last night when you could have stayed silent. Because you're here. Because you're tired of being invisible, Serafina, and I'm offering you visibility. Terms you can negotiate. Power you can leverage. He paused. And because your grandmother is dying and I can make her dying easier, and you love her too much to let pride override pragmatism. It should have felt like manipulation. It probably was manipulation. But he wasn't wrong about any of it. The exhaustion, the invisibility, the love that overrode everything else. I need to read this properly, I said, standing, holding the folder. And I need to talk to my grandmother. Of course. He returned to the desk, pulled out a card, his on this time, and wrote something on the back. My private number. You have until tomorrow at noon. Call Maria when you've decided. She'll handle the logistics. The men outside escorted me to the elevator. Maria waited in the foyer below with a sealed envelope. The first specialist appointment is scheduled for tomorrow morning at 10, regardless of your decision. Transport will be arranged. And this, she handed me the envelope, is an advance to cover any immediate expenses while you consider the offer. Inside were $1,500 bills, $5,000, advance, casual like it meant nothing. I took a cab back to the hospice instead of the car, needing the distance, the normalcy, the illusion of control. Nana Elena was awake, eating applesauce with the slow determination of someone coaxing a failing body through another day. I sat beside her and told her everything. She listened without interrupting, her expression shifting from surprise to concern to something that looked almost like resignation. When I finished, she set down the applesauce and took my hand. This man, she said carefully, Sorrentino, you're sure that's his name? Yes, Dante Sorrentino. Why? Her grip tightened fractionally. I knew a Sorrentino once, long ago in Italy before I came to America. He was from Napoli, but he had business in Calabria, dangerous business. She closed her eyes briefly. What was his father's name? I pulled out the card Dante had given me as if it might contain genealogical information. It didn't. Just his name, the office address, his private number in neat script. He didn't mention his father. Ask him, Nana Elena said. Before you sign anything, ask him about his father, and then decide if you want to walk into that world. She squeezed my hand. Because once you're in, Cara, walking out becomes complicated. You think I shouldn't do it? I think you're going to do it regardless of what I say because you have a good heart and you want to help me and he's offering you the means, but I want you to do it with open eyes. She pulled me closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. Men like him, they don't offer opportunities out of kindness. They offer leverage. Make sure you know what he's leveraging before you agree. That night I read the contract 4 times. I looked up Dante Sorrentino on my phone and found remarkably little, some business registrations, a few photos from charity galas where he stood in the background looking vaguely bored, one article about restaurant expansion that mentioned him only in passing. His digital footprint was deliberately small. controlled, revealing nothing. At midnight, I called Maria Russo's direct number. "Ms. Morty," she answered immediately, no sleep in her voice. "Have you decided?" "I have questions first." "Of course. What exactly does Mr. Sorrentino's business involve, specifically?" A pause. "Import-export logistics, restaurant and hospitality ventures, property management, some financial consultation for private clients." All true, probably, also incomplete, and the things he doesn't list on official documents would be covered by your confidentiality agreement. So there are things. There are always things, Ms. Morty, in any successful enterprise. The question is whether you can live with not knowing every detail while trusting that you won't be asked to participate in anything that violates your personal ethics. Another pause. Mr. Sorrentino is very clear about boundaries. He doesn't ask civilians to cross lines they shouldn't cross. Civilians, the word hung there, heavy with implication. "I want to speak with him," I said, "before I decide, in person, and I want to ask about his father." Maria's silence stretched longer this time. "His father is a sensitive subject." "Then it's a necessary question." "I'll arrange it. 9 a.m. tomorrow before the specialist appointment. Same location." She hung up before I could respond. I sat in the hospice chair, surrounded by the mechanical sounds of monitors and the papery breathing of people saying slow goodbyes, and wondered if I was being brave or stupid or just desperately pragmatic. At 8:45 a.m., I stood outside Dante Sorrentino's building again, wearing the same navy dress because it was the only appropriate thing I owned. The driver had picked me up at 8, handed me an espresso in a proper cup, still hot, perfect, and driven in silence. The men outside the office door recognized me, nodded, let me through without the escort. Dante stood at the window, same position as yesterday, like he'd never left. Maybe he hadn't. When he turned, I saw the fatigue around his eyes, the rumpled quality to his shirt that suggested he'd slept here, if he'd slept at all. "Serafina, you wanted to talk." "Your father," I said, not bothering with preamble. "What was his name?" His expression shuddered. "Why does that matter?" "Because my grandmother asked. And because she's dying, and if she knows something about your family that I should know before I tie myself to you professionally, I need to hear it." He studied me for a long moment, then crossed to a cabinet, poured 2 small glasses of something amber, handed me one. "Salvatore Sorrentino. He died 8 years ago. And before you ask, yes, he was exactly what you're imagining. Traditional, old school, connected to things that are better left unconnected in modern society." "And you?" "I inherited his businesses, restructured what I could, maintained what I had to, built new ventures that look better on paper." He sipped his drink. "I'm trying to transition everything toward legitimacy, but that process takes time. Years. Relationships have to be honored, debts settled, old agreements unwound carefully so no one feels betrayed enough to become vengeful." "So you're still involved?" "Yes, but not the same way, not forever if I can help it." He set his glass down. "Does that change your answer?" I thought about Nana Elena's warning, about the envelope with $5,000, about the way Dante had called the hospice the moment I'd left the restaurant, had known I'd need help, had arranged it without being asked. Power as service, obligation as care. "My grandmother knew your father," I said. "In Italy. She wouldn't tell me details, but she said to ask you about him." Something flickered across Dante's face, surprise quickly controlled. "Elena Morti, that's her name. Elena Bianchi before she married, from Reggio Calabria." He crossed to his desk, pulled out his phone, typed rapidly, waited. His expression changed as he read whatever appeared on the screen, softened, complicated, touched by something almost like regret. "My father had business in Reggio in the 70s, shipping arrangements. He mentioned a woman once, Elena, who'd helped negotiate with local officials when things got difficult. He said she was clever, brave, that she'd probably saved his life, though he never explained how. Dante looked up. He tried to find her years later to thank her properly, but she'd emigrated, married an American. He always regretted not being able to repay that debt. The room felt smaller suddenly, so this offer was made before I knew who your grandmother was, Dante interrupted. I hired you because you're qualified and useful, but yes, knowing this, he gestured vaguely at the phone. It matters. My father believed in honoring debts. I inherited that belief. Elena Bianchi saved him once. Now I can help her granddaughter. Consider it settling old accounts. Debt isn't the same as choice. No, he agreed. Which is why I'm telling you this before you sign, not after. So you know what you're walking into. So you can decide if you want to work for me because it's a good opportunity or because you feel obligated. And if it's the latter, you can walk away without consequence. I finished my drink. The alcohol burned pleasantly. I have conditions. Name them. 3 months, not 6. Clear expectations and hours. I'm not on call 24/7. I visit my grandmother daily, no exceptions. And if you ask me to do anything illegal or unethical, I walk, contract or no contract. Agreed. Anything else? If this is about your father's debt to my grandmother, then it's a gift, not leverage. You don't get to hold it over me later. Agreed. He extended his hand across the desk. Do we have a deal, Serafina? I looked at his hand, clean, still, capable of many things I probably didn't want to know about. Behind him, the city sprawled in morning sunlight, full of people making choices between impossible options. I thought about Nana Elena, about Swiss specialists and private rooms and comfort instead of institutionalized dying, about night classes and futures that might exist beyond frozen service entrances and men who called servers dogs without realizing they understood. I shook his hand. We have a deal. His grip was firm, brief, professional. Maria will handle the paperwork. The specialist appointment is at 10. I'll accompany you if you'd like. Your grandmother should meet me. It's appropriate, given the history. She'll want to lecture you. I expect nothing less. He smiled then, genuine and surprisingly warm, and I realized with a small shock that Dante Sorrentino was handsome when he stopped performing authority and just existed as a person. It was dangerous, that realization. But I'd already signed on for danger by walking into this office, by answering him in Italian, by being the granddaughter of a woman who'd saved his father's life 40 years ago in a city across an ocean. Maria appeared with contracts and folders and a tablet for digital signatures. I signed, initialed, agreed to binding arbitration and confidentiality, and 3 months of translating Italian while pretending not to notice when the conversations turned toward things that weren't listed on tax forms. When we finished, she handed me a phone, new, expensive, preloaded with contact numbers. Yours for work purposes, she explained. Encrypted. Mr. Sorrentino's number, mine, the driver, emergency contacts. Don't use it for personal calls. Understood. At 9:45, we drove to St. Joseph's Hospice in the black car, Dante beside me in the back, Maria in front with the driver. Nobody spoke. The silence felt comfortable somehow, like we'd already settled into a rhythm, an understanding, a shared acknowledgement that this arrangement was strange and necessary, and built on foundations we were all still excavating. The specialist was already waiting when we arrived, Dr. Werner Graf, Swiss-German precision in a gray suit, kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He examined Nana Elena with gentle thoroughness while I translated his questions and her answers, his clinical observations and her sharp commentary. She has weeks, he told me afterward in the hallway, Dante standing beside me like a promise or a threat. Perhaps a month if we're fortunate. There's nothing curative to be done, but we can manage her pain better. I've adjusted her medications. I'll consult with the hospice team weekly, and I'll return myself if she worsens suddenly. You'll have my direct number. Thank you, I managed. Don't thank me, thank him. Dr. Graf nodded toward Dante. He's very persuasive when he wants to be. When the doctor left, Dante and I returned to Nana Alina's room. She watched him approach with those bright, sharp eyes, assessing. When he reached her bedside, he spoke in formal Italian, the kind you use with elders you respect. Signora Bianchi, I'm Dante Sorrentino. My father was Salvator. I understand you knew him many years ago. Salvator, she breathed the name like a ghost. Yes, I knew him. Is he well? He passed 8 years ago, but he spoke of you, of Reggio, of the debt he owed you. Nana Alina's eyes welled. I'm sorry for your loss. He was a difficult man, but not without honor. You have his face, his eyes. She reached out, took Dante's hand with surprising strength. You're helping my granddaughter. Settling old debts. No, she shook her head. Serafina is not a debt. If you're helping her, it should be because you see her value, not because your father owed mine. Do you understand the difference? Dante's expression shifted, surprise, respect, something almost like humility. I do, Signora, and I promise you I see her value. Good. Nana Alina released his hand, looked at me. Then I can rest easier, knowing you're not alone, knowing he understands what it means to honor people, not just obligations. She closed her eyes, tired from the examination. Now both of you leave. Let an old woman sleep. Outside in the hallway, Dante stood very still, looking at nothing. She's remarkable. She always has been. My father would have been glad to know his debt helped her family. He carried regrets about the people he couldn't thank, the favors he left unpaid. Dante turned to me. I meant what I said in there. You're not a debt. You're, he paused, choosing words, an asset, and I don't use that term lightly. Is that supposed to be comforting? It's supposed to be honest. He checked his watch. Tomorrow we start properly. Maria will brief you tonight on the first assignment, translation work for a meeting Wednesday, review of documents before then. For now, stay with your grandmother. The car will take you home whenever you're ready. He left. I stood in the hospice hallway, surrounded by the quiet sounds of monitored dying, and realized I just walked into a life I didn't fully understand but couldn't afford to leave. The weight of it settled on my shoulders like expensive silk, beautiful, binding, impossible to ignore. That evening, Maria Russo arrived at my apartment, a studio in a neighborhood where car alarms were ambient noise, with a leather portfolio and the focused efficiency of someone who'd explained complicated arrangements many times before. First assignment, she said, setting the portfolio on my kitchen table, which was also my desk, dining surface, and only horizontal space. Wednesday afternoon, Mr. Sorrentino meets with representatives from a Milano-based logistics company. They'll discuss shipping routes, facility partnerships, timeline negotiations. Your role: simultaneous translation as needed, attention to subtext, post-meeting summary of anything that seemed inconsistent or concerning. That's vague. Intentionally, you're not there to judge or intervene, just observe and report. She pulled out 3 thick folders. Background on the Milano company, their primary representatives, recent financial statements. Study it. Memorize what you can. Mr. Sorrentino needs to know who he's dealing with before he makes commitments. I flipped through the first folder. Corporate structures, import licenses, warehouse locations across northern Italy. Nothing obviously criminal, but also nothing that explained why Dante needed this level of scrutiny. What am I looking for specifically? Inconsistencies. If someone claims the Genoa facility handles textiles but the documents show machinery imports, that matters. If family connections aren't disclosed, that matters. If someone speaks Sicilian aside to a colleague and thinks you won't understand, that definitely matters. Exactly. Maria stood, smoothing her jacket. You'll be introduced as his cultural consultant and translator. They'll underestimate you. Women always get underestimated in these contexts. Use it. And Serafina, she paused at the door. Don't volunteer information. Answer when asked, translate when needed, but otherwise stay quiet and watchful. Mr. Sorrentino trusts very few people completely. Earn that trust slowly. After she left, I spent 4 hours reading through the folders, taking notes, memorizing names and relationships and the small details that might matter. The Milano company was called Adriatica Logistics. Family-owned, 3 generations, impeccable legal record. Almost too impeccable. The kind of pristine that suggested someone worked very hard to keep certain things hidden. At midnight, my new work phone buzzed. A text from Dante: "Don't stay up too late. You'll need to be sharp Wednesday. And thank you for agreeing and for letting me meet your grandmother. D." I stared at the message. The dash D felt oddly intimate, like a signature between friends. I typed back, studying the materials. "See you Wednesday. No signature, keeping it professional." His response came immediately. "Maria scared you with the subtext lecture, didn't she?" Despite everything, I smiled, a little. "She scares everyone, it's her gift. Sleep well, Serafina." I did sleep, eventually, in my narrow bed in my tiny apartment, and dreamed of shipping manifests and hospital rooms and men with careful hands who turned obligation into opportunity and made it seem like choice. Wednesday arrived with rain and my first real test. Maria picked me up at noon in the black car, handed me a tablet loaded with updated documents, and briefed me during the drive. Adriatica sent 4 representatives instead of the agreed 2. That's already a signal they're either very confident or compensating for weakness. Carlo Messina is the primary contact, late 50s, based in Milano, handles client relations. His son Luca assists, mid-20s, educated in London, supposed to be the modern face of the family business. The other 2 are last-minute additions: Marco Rinaldi, who handles logistics, and Giulia Ferraro, listed as legal counsel. And you're concerned because Giulia Ferraro doesn't exist in any legal database prior to 6 months ago, and Marco Rinaldi has financial connections to shipping interests in Palermo that aren't mentioned in official materials. Maria glanced at me. "Your job is to determine if these inconsistencies are sloppy paperwork or intentional deception." We arrived at a private club, the kind with no signage, just a brass number on an unmarked door. Inside, dark wood, leather chairs, hushed conversations, the smell of espresso and old money. Dante waited in a private room on the second floor, standing by tall windows that overlooked the rain-soaked street. He dressed for the meeting in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my previous year's rent, his hair pushed back, expression neutral but alert. "Serafina," he nodded, professional, "ready. As I'll ever be." "They'll test you, Carlo especially. He's old school, doesn't trust women in business contexts. Ignore it. Translate accurately regardless of tone. If anyone switches to dialect thinking you won't understand, pretend you don't until it becomes strategically useful to reveal you do. Clear?" "Very." The Adriatica representatives arrived at 1. Carlo Messina looked exactly like his photos: silver hair, expensive suit, the confident posture of someone who'd never been told no by anyone who mattered. His son Luca trailed behind, younger and less certain, trying too hard to seem relaxed. Marco Rinaldi was compact and watchful, eyes always moving. And Giulia Ferraro was striking. Late 30s, perfectly tailored navy suit, briefcase that probably cost more than the briefcase's contents were worth. Introductions in Italian, handshakes, the careful choreography of people assessing each other. Carlo's gaze lingered on me with unconcealed dismissal. "Your translator, she looks young." "Ms. Morty is highly qualified," Dante said smoothly, switching to English for my apparent benefit, a fiction we'd agreed on to make them comfortable speaking freely. "She studied in Roma, specializes in business Italian with regional dialect familiarity." "Impressive," Carlo said in Italian, his tone suggesting the opposite. He settled into a chair, accepted espresso from the server who'd appeared silently. "Shall we begin?" They discussed shipping routes, facility partnerships, timelines for expanding operations into American markets. I translated when necessary, kept my expression neutral, took careful mental notes. The conversation seemed straightforward until Marco Rinaldi leaned toward Giulia and muttered in Sicilian, low enough he thought no one would catch it. Pensi chi lui sa del nostro affair con Castellano. Does he know about our arrangement with Castellano? I kept my expression blank, continued translating Carlo's overview of warehouse capacity, but beside me, Dante had gone very still in the way predators do before they strike. He'd heard, understood, and now we both knew Adriatica had side arrangements they weren't disclosing, probably with competitors or overlapping interests that could create conflicts. The meeting continued another hour. I translated timelines, clarified terminology, helped negotiate phasing schedules. When they switched to discussing family businesses and traditions, Luca mentioned his mother's uncle in Palermo, casually, like it didn't matter. But it mattered, because that uncle was the connection to Marco Rinaldi, the undisclosed relationship that tied Adriatica to interests Dante probably needed to know about. When the Adriatica representatives finally left, promising to send revised contracts by Friday, Dante waited until the door closed before turning to me. Castellano, who is he? Shipping magnate based in Palermo, handles a lot of Mediterranean routes, some with complicated reputations. If Adriatica has arrangements with him that they're not disclosing, then they're either trying to play both sides or they're more deeply connected to traditional operations than their clean paperwork suggests. Dante leaned against the window, arms crossed. What else? Luca's mother's uncle in Palermo is named Rinaldi, same surname as Marco, likely related, which means the Messina family has blood ties to Palermo interests through marriage, not just business. Giulia Ferraro. Too polished, too practiced. My guess. She's not really legal counsel. She's there to assess you, report back to whoever actually runs things behind the corporate structure. Dante smiled, quick, appreciative. Excellent. That's exactly the kind of analysis I need. He pulled out his phone, texted rapidly. Maria's digging deeper into Castellano and the Rinaldi connection. We'll reapproach the contract terms based on what we find. If they're hiding relationships, they don't get favorable concessions. And if they walk away, then they walk away. I don't build partnerships on hidden foundations. He looked at me directly, his expression shifting into something more personal. You did well today. Carlo dismissed you completely, which meant he and Marco got careless. That's valuable. Happy to be underestimated. Good, because it won't last forever. Eventually they'll realize you're not decorative, but we'll use it while we can. He checked his watch. I have calls to make. Maria will take you home, but tomorrow night there's a dinner. More social than business, but several useful people will attend. I'd like you there. As translator. As my guest. He said it casually, but something in his tone made it clear this was a different kind of assignment. These dinners are where actual business gets negotiated in the margins. You'll hear conversations I won't be present for, see dynamics I'll miss while occupied with other obligations. You want me to spy at a dinner party? I want you to listen at a dinner party. There's a difference. He smiled faintly. And I'll need you to look the part. Maria's arranged wardrobe. Let her handle it. Don't argue about the expense. I can't afford. You're not paying. It's business expense. You represent me now, Serafina. That means you need to look like you belong in rooms where million-euro deals get negotiated over dessert wine. It should have felt insulting. Instead, it felt practical. Cold, maybe, but honest. What time tomorrow? Car picks you up at 7. Dress formal. And Serafina, he turned back to the window. Enjoy it a little if you can. These dinners are performances, but the food's usually excellent. Maria took me home, handed me another folder, guest list and brief backgrounds for tomorrow's dinner, and left with a reminder to check my email for wardrobe appointment details. I spent the evening reading about wealthy families and old money and the careful social architecture that separated people who owned things from people who served them. At 10 p.m., I visited Nana Alina. She was awake, reading her Dante with a magnifying glass, looking frailer than she had days before. I told her about the meeting, about Dante's careful navigation of hidden relationships, about the dinner tomorrow. She listened, then set down the book. "You're good at this, the watching, the listening. You always were, even as a child, you saw things others missed." Is that a compliment or a warning? Both. She took my hand. Men like Dante Sorrentino, they value what you do until the moment your value threatens their control. Be useful, Kara, but keep something back. Some part of yourself they can't access or leverage. I'm just translating. No, she said firmly. You're navigating power, that's different, more dangerous. She squeezed my fingers. But I trust you to be smart. You have my blood, we survive by seeing what others overlook. I stayed until she slept, then went home to my studio apartment and stared at my closet full of work uniforms and thrift store finds, trying to imagine what kind of dress could make me look like I belonged at a dinner where million-euro deals got negotiated over dessert wine. The wardrobe appointment happened at a boutique I'd never even noticed before, tucked on a side street, no window displays, the kind of place where you needed an invitation to enter. Maria met me there at 4 p.m., nodded to the owner, and said simply, "Mr. Sorrentino's guest. Formal dinner tonight. She needs appropriate attire and accessories." The owner, a woman named Isabel with silver hair and the assessing gaze of someone who'd dressed important people for decades, circled me once, hummed thoughtfully, and disappeared into the back. She returned with an armful of options. "Try these. Find what feels powerful but comfortable. You need to move through the room with confidence, not worry about your hemline." I tried on 6 dresses before finding the right one. Deep emerald silk that hit just below the knee, structured but not restrictive, elegant without trying too hard. It was the most expensive thing I'd ever worn. When I emerged from the fitting room, Maria nodded approval. "Perfect. Shoes, bag, minimal jewelry. Keep the focus on your face and your competence." Isabel added strappy heels that somehow didn't hurt, a small clutch in black leather, and a delicate gold chain that settled at my collarbone like a deliberate statement. When I looked in the mirror, I barely recognized myself, not transformed into someone else, but revealed as a version I'd never had the resources to become. "Mr. Sorrentino has excellent instincts," Isabel said, making final adjustments. "He sees potential where others see only surface." I wondered if that was a compliment or just efficient talent acquisition. At 7, the car arrived. I'd done my own makeup, careful, understated, emphasizing eyes because that's where people would look when I translated. My hair was pulled back simply, professional. The dress moved like water when I walked. I felt armored and exposed simultaneously. Dante waited outside the venue, a private estate north of the city, all iron gates and manicured grounds. He wore black, sharply tailored, looking less like a businessman and more like someone who owned the night itself. When he saw me, something flickered across his expression. Surprise, appreciation, something else I couldn't name. "Serafina, you look," he paused, "formidable." "Is that good?" "It's perfect." He offered his arm, ready. I took his arm, felt the solid warmth of him through expensive fabric, and walked into a world I'd only ever served from the margins. The dinner was held in a glass conservatory overlooking gardens lit by carefully placed lanterns. 50 guests, maybe, all moving through the space with the practiced ease of people who attended these events regularly. Servers circulated with champagne and delicate appetizers. String quartet played something classical in the corner. Everything gleamed. The crystal, the silverware, the jewelry on the women, the watches on the men. Dante introduced me to clusters of guests, his hand resting lightly at the small of my back, a gesture that looked protective but felt like a claim. Serafina Morty, my cultural consultant and translator. Most smiled politely and moved on. A few lingered, curious about the new face in Dante's orbit. One man, older, silver-haired with the bearing of old money, studied me openly. "Morty, from where?" "My mother's Calabrese. Father was American." "Ah, and you work with Dante now. How fortunate." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Tell me, Ms. Morty, what exactly does a cultural consultant do?" "Helps navigate misunderstandings," I said carefully. "Language is complicated. Context matters." "Indeed." He glanced at Dante. "You always did have an eye for useful acquisitions, Sorrentino." Dante's hand pressed slightly firmer against my back. "Serafina is a colleague, not an acquisition, Vittorio. I'd appreciate if you remembered the distinction." Vittorio raised his champagne glass in mock salute and moved away. I exhaled slowly. "Friend of yours?" I asked. "Business acquaintance. Old guard. He doesn't approve of how I'm restructuring things, thinks I'm too modern, too willing to legitimize operations." Dante steered me toward quieter corner. "He'll test you all evening. Ignore him." But Vittorio wasn't the only test. Throughout dinner, seated at a long table that sparkled with more silverware than I'd ever seen assigned to a single meal, I listened to conversations in 3 languages, watched power dynamics play out through seating arrangements, and who spoke to whom and whose opinions got dismissed or amplified. Beside me, a woman named Claudia asked about my background. I kept it vague: university in Roma, work in hospitality, languages. She nodded, seeming satisfied, then lowered her voice. "And you're with Dante, personally, I mean." "Professionally." She sipped wine. "That's what they all say at first." I didn't respond. Across the table, Dante was deep in conversation with a man who ran shipping operations in Trieste. Their Italian was formal, careful, the kind of language people use when they're negotiating without appearing to negotiate. I caught fragments: expansion timelines, facility access, mutual interests in maintaining stability. After dinner, guests moved to a terrace for espresso and digestifs. I found a relatively quiet corner and watched the social choreography: who sought out whom, which conversations happened in full view versus which got conducted in careful privacy. Dante moved through it all with easy confidence, shaking hands, laughing at jokes, performing accessibility while maintaining clear boundaries. Vittorio found me on the terrace, carrying 2 small glasses of something amber. "Grappa, Calabrese naturally. I thought you might appreciate it." I accepted it cautiously. "Thank you." "You're wondering why I'm being friendly after earlier." He leaned against the railing beside me. "Because I'm curious about you, Ms. Morty. Dante doesn't bring people into his orbit casually. The fact that you're here suggests you matter. I'm trying to determine why." "Maybe I'm just good at translation." "Maybe." He studied me. "Or maybe you remind him that power doesn't have to be inherited, it can be earned. That's dangerous thinking in our world, but he's always been prone to dangerous thinking." Before I could respond, Dante appeared, his expression neutral but his eyes sharp. "Vittorio, enjoying the grappa?" "Immensely. And your translator's company. She's more interesting than your usual associates." "I don't have usual associates. I have carefully selected professionals." Dante's hand found my back again. "Serafina, walk with me. There's someone I'd like you to meet." We left Vittorio on the terrace and moved inside, through glass doors into a library lined with leather-bound books. Dante closed the door, and we were alone for the first time all evening. "Are you all right?" he asked. "Fine. Vittorio's testing me, but I expected that." "He's testing me through you, trying to determine if you're a weakness or an asset." Dante crossed to the window, hands in pockets. "For the record, I consider you an asset. But I need to know tonight: the attention, the questions, the performance of belonging. Is it too much? I can reduce your visibility if it's becoming uncomfortable." I thought about Claudia's knowing smile, Vittorio's calculated curiosity, the weight of 50 people assessing whether I belonged. "It's manageable, but Dante, what exactly am I to you? Colleague, Employee. Prop. He turned, his expression serious. You're someone I trust to see what I miss. That's rare, valuable, worth protecting. He paused. And if people assume you're more than a professional associate, let them assume. It creates useful ambiguity. Ambiguity that protects you or controls me. Both, I won't lie about that. He moved closer, not touching but present. But here's what I'll promise. I don't lie to you, I don't put you in danger without warning, and if you want out, you can leave. No retaliation, no punishment. You're not trapped, Serafina, even if it sometimes feels that way. I wanted to believe him, part of me did. But Nana Alina's voice whispered in my memory, keep something back, some part they can't leverage. Okay, I said, but I need honesty. If something's about to become dangerous or complicated, tell me. Don't protect me by keeping me ignorant. Agreed. We returned to the party. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of conversations and careful observations. I memorized names, noted who avoided whom, caught two separate discussions in Sicilian that revealed concerns about territorial disputes and shipping routes. At 11, Dante indicated it was time to leave. We said polite goodbyes, collected coats, descended the steps to where the car waited. In the back seat, darkness and leather and the fatting smell of the party's perfumed glamour, Dante asked, "What did you learn tonight?" Vittorio's concerned you're legitimizing too quickly, thinks it'll leave vulnerabilities. Claudia's suspects were personally involved, probably spreading that gossip. The man from Trieste wants facility access but won't commit without guarantees about neutrality in territorial disputes. And at least 3 people mentioned someone named Castellano with either respect or concern, depending on their own affiliations. Dante smiled in the darkness. Excellent, anything else? You're either very trusted or very feared. Maybe both. And people are waiting to see which direction you take things, toward complete legitimacy or back toward traditional operations. And what do you think I should do? I looked at him. This man who'd pulled me from a frozen service entrance into a world of grappa and glass conservatories, who'd settled his father's debts through my grandmother's dying comfort, who offered power that felt like opportunity and control that felt like care. I think you're trying to build something different, I said. But the foundations are old, and old foundations have deep roots. Pulling them up without destroying everything else, that's complicated. It is, he agreed. But I have help now, someone who sees the roots I'm trying to avoid tripping over. The car pulled up to my building. Dante walked me to the door, unnecessary, protective, a signal to anyone watching that I was under his regard. At the entrance, he paused. Thank you for tonight, for understanding what I needed without me having to explain it. That's the job, isn't it? It's more than the job. He reached out, adjusted the gold chain at my collarbone, a touch so brief it might have been accidental except for the deliberateness in his eyes. Keep the dress, keep everything, you'll need it again. He left before I could respond, disappearing into the car, into the night, leaving me standing in the doorway of my shabby building wearing emerald silk and expensive shoes, feeling like I'd crossed a border I couldn't uncross and wasn't sure I wanted to. Upstairs, I changed into old clothes, hung the dress carefully, and sat at my kitchen table with the folders Maria had given me. Tomorrow, I'd translate documents. Next week, another meeting. The week after, perhaps another dinner. And slowly, inevitable as gravity, I'd become someone different, someone who belonged in glass conservatories, who understood power's architecture, who could move between worlds without losing herself. Or so I hoped. My phone, the work phone, buzzed. A text from Dante, sleep well. Tomorrow we discuss Castellano and what Adriatica's hiding. Your observations tonight were invaluable. D. I stared at the message, at that -D signature that felt increasingly personal, and wondered when exactly I'd stop being just a translator and become something else entirely. Something more dangerous. something I couldn't name but could feel pulling at me like current beneath calm water. I typed back, "Good night, see you tomorrow." No signature, keeping the boundary, holding something back, just like Nana Alina taught me. But the current was already pulling, and I wasn't sure I wanted to resist. The next 3 weeks moved like water, smooth surface, complicated undertow. I translated documents, attended meetings, accompanied Dante to dinners and negotiations where I listened more than I spoke and learned to read power's subtle language. He taught me without seeming to teach, which silences mattered, whose opinions carried weight, how to distinguish genuine offers from strategic positioning. We established rhythms, morning briefings over espresso in his office, my notes from the previous day spread between us, afternoon translations, sometimes in conference rooms, sometimes in the back of the car between appointments, evening debriefs where I summarized observations and he explained contexts I'd missed. It felt professional, structured, safe. Except for the moments when it didn't. Like the afternoon he placed his hand over mine during a tense negotiation, a gesture that looked casual but steadied me when the conversation had turned hostile. Or the evening, he insisted on walking me into the hospice after a late meeting, staying while I sat with Nana Alina even though he had calls waiting. Or the way he remembered that I took espresso with a single sugar, that I was left-handed, that I bit my lower lip when I was thinking through complicated translations. Small things, dangerous things. Nana Alina noticed. "He looks at you like you're a puzzle he wants to solve," she said one morning, when Dante had left flowers, not for me, for her, white roses because she'd mentioned once they were her favorite. "He's my employer." And Salvatore was my employer's contact until he wasn't. These things blur, Cara, especially when power is involved. I didn't argue because she wasn't wrong. The boundaries were blurring, not through any single moment but through accumulation, 100 small attentions that added up to something larger, more complicated, harder to categorize or contain. The Castellano situation escalated in week 3. Maria's research revealed that Adriatica Logistics wasn't just connected to Castellano's operation. They were functionally a subsidiary, hidden behind corporate structures and family relationships. When Dante confronted Carlo Messina about the deception, Carlo's response was defiant. "You're trying to go legitimate, Sorrentino. We understand that. But some of us remember what your father built, how he built it. You don't get to pretend you're clean while using infrastructure your father established through traditional means." The meeting happened in Dante's office, me translating Carlo's formal Italian into English for the record, though Dante understood every word. When Carlo finished, Dante leaned back in his chair, expression unreadable. "My father built many things. Some I'm keeping, some I'm changing, and some I'm dismantling entirely because they're unsustainable in the current legal environment. Adriatica can either adapt to that reality or find other partners. Your choice." Carlo stood jaw tight. "You're making enemies, Dante. People who remember loyalty, who understand that some debts can't be restructured away." "I remember loyalty too, but I define it differently than you do." Dante's voice remained level, almost gentle. "We're done here. Maria will send the contract termination paperwork." After they left, the office felt charged, dangerous. Dante stood at the window, silent for long minutes. I gathered my notes, prepared to leave, give him space. "Stay," he said, not turning. "Please." I stayed, waited. Finally he spoke. "My father built his empire by making people need him, creating dependencies. That's loyalty through leverage. You stay because leaving costs too much. I'm trying to build something different. Loyalty through respect, through fair dealing. But it means losing people like Carlo who only understand the old way." He turned, looked at me directly. "Am I wrong to try?" "No, but you're right that it's difficult. You're asking people to trust a new system when the old one, for all its problems, was predictable. And you, do you trust the new system, or are you here because you feel you have no choice?" The question landed heavy. I'm here because the opportunity is real. The money helps my grandmother. The work is interesting, but I paused, choosing honesty. Yes, I'm also aware that leaving would be complicated. You've made yourself necessary. That's a kind of leverage, even if it's gentler than what your father used. He crossed to where I stood, stopped close enough that I caught cedar and something underneath, uniquely him. What if I could give you an out, right now? Full contract payment, no retaliation, a reference that would open doors. Would you leave? My heart hammered. Why are you asking? Because you're becoming something I can't afford to lose, and I need to know if that's mutual or if I'm building another dependency that looks like partnership. His voice dropped lower. I don't want you here out of obligation, Serafina. He stopped, jaw tightening. I want you to choose this, choose me. The work, the partnership, all of it, freely. The air between us felt electric. And if I choose to stay, what does that mean, for us? It means we stop pretending this is purely professional. He raised one hand slowly, giving me time to move away. When I didn't, he touched my face, thumb brushing my cheekbone. It means I admit that you've become something more, that I think about you when I shouldn't, that having you close makes me feel simultaneously more capable and more vulnerable, and I don't know how to navigate that. I should have stepped back, maintained the boundary, but his touch was warm and certain, and I was tired of pretending I didn't feel the pull too. This is a terrible idea, I whispered. Probably. Power dynamics, conflict of interest, your world being dangerous. All true. And my grandmother would lecture us both about making smart choices. She definitely would. His thumb traced my jaw. I closed my eyes briefly, feeling the warmth, the steadiness, the absolute certainty in his touch. When I opened them again, he was watching me with an expression I'd never seen before, vulnerable, hopeful, almost afraid. What are you asking, Dante? I'm asking if I can kiss you. And if the answer is yes, I'm asking if you'll stay, not because you're obligated, but because you want to see where this goes. I thought about Nana Alina's warning, about keeping something back, about power and leverage and how easily care could become control. But I also thought about 3 weeks of morning espresso and careful attention, and the way he'd stayed in the hospice hallway while I sat with my dying grandmother, not intruding but present. Yes, I said, to both. He kissed me carefully like I might break or disappear, his hand cupping my face while his other arm settled at my waist. It wasn't the kiss of someone taking what they wanted. It was the kiss of someone asking permission with every heartbeat, checking that I was still there, still choosing this. When we broke apart, he rested his forehead against mine. This complicates everything. I know. We'll need to be careful, discreet. Some people will see you as a weakness to exploit. I know that too. And if it ever becomes too much, the scrutiny, the danger, the performance, you tell me. We figure it out together or we stop. Dante, I pulled back enough to meet his eyes. I'm not fragile. I'm not decoration. If we're doing this, we do it as equals. You don't get to protect me by excluding me from decisions or information. Clear. He smiled, genuine, relieved, almost joyful. Very clear, equal partners in everything. Good. We stood there in his office with the city spread below, and I felt the boundary dissolve completely. Not erased, transformed. Something new built on the foundation of what had been purely professional, more complicated and more honest simultaneously. His phone rang. He ignored it. Come to dinner with me, not a business dinner, just us. There's a place in the old quarter, family-owned, quiet, no one who matters will see us. When? Tonight, now. We'll tell Maria to cancel whatever's scheduled. I laughed. You can't just cancel your evening. Watch me. He was already texting. I've spent 3 weeks being careful, professional, appropriate. Tonight, I want to have dinner with someone I care about without worrying about who's watching or what signals it sends. His phone buzzed, Maria's response. probably containing several pointed questions he was ignoring. He pocketed it, offered his hand. Serafina Morty, will you have dinner with me? No translation required, no strategic observations, just conversation and wine and the best carbonara north of Roma. I took his hand, yes. We left through the private elevator, avoiding the front entrance where his driver waited. Took a cab like normal people, drove through evening traffic to a neighborhood where restaurants had checkered tablecloths and handwritten menus and wine served in simple glasses. The place he'd mentioned was tiny, 6 tables, a grandmother cooking in the visible kitchen, her grandson serving. Dante ordered in the rapid, comfortable Italian of someone who'd been coming here for years. The grandson recognized him, grinned, said something teasing that made Dante laugh and shake his head. We sat at the corner table, tucked away from the windows, and for the first time since I'd met him, Dante looked fully relaxed. This is where my father used to bring me, he said, tearing bread. Every Sunday when I was young, before everything got complicated, before I understood what his business actually involved. What did you think he did? Helped people, solved problems. He was good at making himself necessary, making others grateful. I thought that was heroism. Dante sipped wine. I was probably 16 before I understood that making people need you isn't the same as helping them. But you're different. Trying to be, some days I'm more successful than others. He reached across the table, fingers brushing mine. Thank you for staying tonight, for choosing this. We ate carbonara that lived up to his promise, drank wine that tasted like honey and something darker, talked about things that had nothing to do with business. Books we'd read, places we wanted to travel, the weird intimacy of learning someone outside the performance of professional necessity. He told me about studying economics in Milano, about the moment he'd realized his father's empire was both legacy and trap. I told him about my mother's death when I was 19, about raising myself through scholarships and restaurant shifts, about the particular loneliness of being fluent in languages but not belonging fully to any single culture. You're between, he said, understanding. Neither fully Italian nor fully American, always translating even when you're speaking your native tongue. Yes, exactly that. I know the feeling, between my father's world and the one I'm trying to build, between legitimate and something else, always negotiating the distance. The grandmother emerged from the kitchen to personally deliver dessert, panna cotta with berry compote, and said something to Dante that made him blush slightly. He responded, laughing, and she winked at me before returning to her domain. What did she say? I asked. That you're much prettier than the last girl I brought here and she approves. He smiled. She also said if I hurt you, she'll poison my carbonara next time. I like her already. We walked back through the old quarter afterward, past ancient buildings and graffitied walls and the particular magic of a city at night when you're not trying to get anywhere specific. Dante held my hand like it was the most natural thing in the world, our fingers intertwined, his thumb tracing absent circles on my wrist. This was perfect, I said. It was. He stopped under a streetlight, pulled me closer. But tomorrow, reality returns. Meetings, translations, all the careful performance. Can you handle the switching back and forth, public, professional, private, personal? Can you? I'm going to try because I think you're worth the complication. He kissed me again, slower this time, deeper, less tentative. When we broke apart, his expression had shifted into something more serious. But Serafina, I need you to promise me something. What? If someone threatens you because of me, you tell me immediately. Don't try to handle it alone. Don't protect me by staying silent. Promise. A chill ran through me despite the warmth of his hands. Who would threaten me? Hopefully no one. But Carlo was angry when he left today. Vittorio's still testing boundaries. There are others who see you as my weakness now, especially after tonight's dinner where we were decidedly not discreet. He cupped my face. I need you safe. That matters more than anything. I'll be careful, I promise. We caught a cab to my building. He walked me upstairs, another unnecessary protective gesture that I was starting to appreciate. At my door, he kissed me once more, gently. Tomorrow, 9 a.m. We'll strategize how to handle the Adriatica fallout, but tonight, he smiled. Tonight was ours, thank you for that. After he left, I leaned against the closed door and tried to catch my breath. My heart, the sense that I just stepped off a cliff and was either flying or falling, too soon to tell which. I checked my personal phone, 3 missed calls from the hospice. My stomach dropped. I called back immediately. Ms. Morty, the night nurse's voice was gentle. Your grandmother's asking for you. She's comfortable, but she'd like you here. I grabbed my coat, called a cab, arrived at St. Joseph's within 20 minutes. Nana Alina was awake, propped on pillows, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her but with those eyes still bright. Kara, she reached for me. You smell like wine and happiness. Good. I was worried you'd become all business, all strategy, no joy. I had dinner with Dante, a real date, not work. Even better. She squeezed my hand weakly. He's a good man trying to be better, like his father was a complicated man trying to be good. The sons always carry the father's contradictions. Nana. Hush, I'm not dying tonight, but soon. We both know it. So I want to tell you something about Salvatore Sorrentino, about the debt his son thinks he's repaying. I settled into the chair beside her bed, held her hand, listened. Reggio 1974, Salvatore came to negotiate shipping access. He needed local cooperation, offered money, protection, the usual arrangements. But there was a man, a local official, who wanted more, who saw Salvatore as foreign, Napolitano, outsider, who decided to make an example. Nana Alina's eyes went distant, remembering. They ambushed him, would have killed him, probably. I was there, wrong place, right time, and I knew a back way through the old quarter. I helped him escape. Hid him in my uncle's shop until his people could arrive. You saved his life. I helped him not die, there's a difference. She looked at me directly. But here's what you need to know, Salvatore didn't forget. He tried to repay me, offered money, opportunities. I refused, told him I didn't want to be part of his world. He respected that, left me alone, but he kept watch from a distance. Made sure I got my visa when I wanted to emigrate. Made sure my husband got work when we arrived in America. Made sure, her voice cracked. Made sure my daughter got treatment when she got sick, even though it didn't save her. He did all that quietly, without asking for anything back. My throat tightened. I didn't know. Because he didn't want acknowledgement, he wanted to balance the scales. Nana Alina pulled me closer. Dante isn't doing the same thing, Kara. He's trying to repay his father's debt, yes, but he's also choosing you. Those are different motivations. Don't confuse gratitude with affection. Make sure he doesn't either. I think he knows the difference. Good, then be happy, be careful, be smart. She smiled faintly. And bring him to see me again soon. I want to lecture him properly before I die. I stayed until she slept, kissed her forehead, promised to return in the morning. On the cab ride home, I thought about debts and choices, about fathers and sons, about how many invisible threads connected Dante and me through generations and geography and decisions made decades before we met. When I finally crawled into bed at 2 a.m., my work phone buzzed. Dante, Maria told me about the hospice call. Is everything all right? She's stable, wanted to talk, I'm home now. Good, sleep, tomorrow will be complicated. A pause, and Serafina, tonight mattered to me, just wanted you to know. I typed back, to me too, good night, Dante. This time, I added the signature, drew my own boundary by choosing when to cross it. His response was just a heart emoji, surprisingly unguarded from someone so controlled. I fell asleep smiling, not yet knowing that complicated was an understatement, that tomorrow would bring dangers we hadn't anticipated, that crossing boundaries always had costs we couldn't calculate until we'd already paid them. But in that moment, in the dark of my small apartment, I felt something that had been absent for too long. Hope. Possibility. The sense that I was building something real instead of just surviving someone else's architecture. It felt like enough. It felt like everything. Morning arrived with Maria's call at 7:30, her voice tight with controlled urgency. Meeting at 8. Something's happened. Car's already on its way. What? She'd already hung up. I dressed quickly, professional armor, the navy suit that said I was competent and unrattled, and met the car downstairs. The driver's expression was grim. Maria sat in the passenger seat, typing rapidly on her tablet. The Adriatica situation escalated, she said without preamble. Last night, someone leaked information about Mr. Sorrentino's business restructuring plans to the Financial Regulatory Authority. Anonymous tip, but detailed enough to trigger an audit. It's Carlo, has to be, retaliating for the contract termination. My stomach sank. How bad? Manageable if we're strategic, disastrous if we mishandle it. Everything needs to look completely legitimate, which it is, mostly. But audits have a way of finding complications even in clean operations. She glanced back at me. Mr. Sorrentino's going to need you visible today. Present during meetings, obviously supportive. It sends the message that his team is confident and unified. I'm a translator, not. You're more than a translator now. You're his partner publicly. Whether you like it or not, that's how people see you after last night's dinner. Her expression softened slightly. I know you didn't sign up for this level of exposure, but it's the reality. Can you handle it? I thought about Nana Elena's warning, about leverage and visibility, about the cost of crossing boundaries. Yes. At the office, Dante stood by the windows, phone pressed to his ear, his free hand clenched in a fist. When we entered, he held up one finger, wait, and finished the call. When he turned, his expression was controlled, but I saw the fury underneath. Good morning, he said, voice level. We have a situation. Maria briefed me on the details. The audit would begin next week, covering 3 years of financial records, property transactions, business partnerships. Nothing illegal would surface. Dante had been careful, but the scrutiny alone could spook investors, create doubt, give rivals openings to poach contracts or undermine negotiations. We need to look absolutely confident, Dante said. Business as usual. No canceled meetings, no sudden changes. The message is, we have nothing to hide, we welcome transparency. In Carlo, I asked. Carlo will regret this decision, but not through retaliation, through patience. Let the audit clear us, prove everything's legitimate, then watch as his connection to Castellano becomes the more interesting story for regulators. Dante smiled thinly. Sometimes the best revenge is stepping aside and letting someone's own choices destroy them. The day proceeded in a blur of meetings, phone calls, carefully worded statements. I translated, took notes, stood beside Dante in conference rooms where his presence needed amplification. By lunch, my face hurt from maintaining a professional expression. In the brief window between meetings, Dante pulled me into his office, closed the door. I'm sorry, he said immediately. This is exactly what I told you wouldn't happen, danger by association. If you want distance until this settles. Dante, I touched his arm. I'm not running. I'm annoyed that Carlo's petty and vindictive, but I'm not running. He pulled me into an embrace, sudden and tight. Thank you for staying, for being calm when I'm, he breathed out slowly, less calm than I appear. We stood there, holding each other until Maria knocked. Back to the performance. Back to the careful choreography of confidence we needed to project. That evening, exhausted, I visited Nana Elena. She took one look at my face and said, "What happened?" I told her everything. The audit, Carlo's retaliation, the complicated day of pretending everything was fine while building defenses. She listened, then sighed. This is what I meant, Cara. You're not just translating anymore. You're inside the walls, which means when the castle gets attacked, you're vulnerable too. I know. And you're staying anyway. I'm staying anyway. She studied me with those bright, knowing eyes. Because of the work or because of him? Both, honestly. The work matters, but him, I paused. He matters too, maybe more than he should this quickly. Love is always inconvenient timing, she smiled faintly. Your grandfather proposed to me after knowing me 3 weeks. My mother was horrified, but sometimes you just know. Did you know? I knew he was worth the risk. That's different from knowing everything would work out perfectly. She squeezed my hand. Dante is worth your risk, I think. Just remember, you can love someone and still maintain boundaries. Care and self-preservation aren't mutually exclusive. I stayed until visiting hours ended, then returned to my apartment to find the building's lobby occupied by a man in a dark suit I didn't recognize. He stood when I entered. Ms. Morty, I'm Marco Rinaldi. We met briefly at the Adriatica meeting. I was hoping we could talk. Every alarm in my body activated. About what? About options, opportunities. Mr. Sorrentino isn't the only person who values talented translators with cultural expertise. He smiled, all surface, no warmth. Perhaps somewhere more private, your apartment. No, I moved toward the stairs. If you want to discuss professional opportunities, contact my employer's office during business hours. His smile hardened. Mr. Sorrentino's facing significant regulatory scrutiny. That situation may affect his ability to retain staff, compensate appropriately. I'm simply offering alternative employment. I'm not interested. You haven't heard the terms. I don't need to. I kept moving toward the stairs. Good night, Mr. Rinaldi. His hand caught my wrist, not hard but present. You should consider carefully before rejecting offers out of misplaced loyalty. Sorrentino's made enemies. Those enemies might become your problem if you continue aligning yourself with him so publicly. I looked at his hand on my wrist, then met his eyes. You have 3 seconds to let go before I scream assault in a building full of witnesses. He released me, stepping back, hands raised in mock surrender. Just offering options, Ms. Morty. Keep it in mind. I took the stairs 2 at a time, locked myself in my apartment, and immediately called Dante. He answered on the first ring. Serafina. Marco Rinaldi was in my building, waiting, offering me alternative employment and making vague threats about your enemies becoming my problem. Silence, then, are you hurt? No, shaken but fine. I'm sending security to your building. Tonight, they'll stay in the lobby until this settles. Dante, that's non-negotiable. His voice had shifted into something harder, more dangerous. He put his hands on you. Just my wrist, I handled it. You shouldn't have to handle it. I heard movement, his jacket rustling. I'm coming over. You don't need to. Yes, I do, for me, because I can't. He stopped, started again. Please let me come over, let me make sure you're safe. 20 minutes later, Dante arrived with 2 security personnel who positioned themselves discreetly in the lobby. He came upstairs alone, still dressed in his meeting clothes but rumpled, exhausted, holding a bag from a nearby deli. You haven't eaten, he said, moving past me into the apartment. Neither have I, so we're eating, and then we're going to discuss how to handle this properly. We sat at my small kitchen table, eating sandwiches that tasted like cardboard because the adrenaline hadn't fully worn off. Dante kept looking at me like he was memorizing my face, checking for damage. I should never have let you be this visible, he said finally. The dinner last night, it painted a target on you. You didn't force me to go. I didn't warn you properly about the consequences. He set down his sandwich, reached across the table. Serafina, I need to ask you something difficult. Would you consider relocating, temporarily, somewhere safer while this audit plays out and Carlo's people lose interest? Relocate where? I have a property in the mountains. Alpine region, secure, private. You could work remotely, I'd visit regularly. Your grandmother could be transferred to a facility nearby, better care, actually more peaceful. It was logical, protective, also isolating. You're trying to put me somewhere you can control the access. I'm trying to put you somewhere Marco Rinaldi can't wait in your lobby at night making threats. His voice cracked slightly. I can't protect you if you're exposed like this. And I can't. He closed his eyes briefly. I can't lose you, not to Carlo's pettiness or to my own poor risk management. I stood, walked around the table, settled into the chair beside him, took his face in my hands, made him look at me. I'm not going anywhere, not because I'm stubborn, though I am, but because running sends exactly the wrong message. It tells Carlo and Marco and everyone else that I'm a vulnerability you'll sacrifice your position to protect. That makes me more valuable as leverage, not less. You're asking me to let you stay in danger. I'm asking you to trust that I can navigate danger, that I'm not decoration or weakness, I'm a partner who can handle complications. I kissed him softly. But I'll compromise. Keep security in the building. Brief me properly on threats. Include me in decisions about how to handle retaliation. Treat me like an equal instead of something fragile. He searched my face, then nodded slowly. Equal partners, including when it's difficult. Especially then. He stayed that night, not in any romantic capacity, just present. He worked on his laptop while I read documents, both of us existing in the same space, finding comfort in proximity. Around midnight, I made tea. We stood together in my tiny kitchen, drinking Earl Grey from mismatched mugs, not talking, just being. This is nice, he said finally. Quiet, normal. It won't last. Tomorrow more meetings, more careful navigation. I know, but tonight, he set down his mug, pulled me close. Tonight I want to remember that underneath all the strategy and protection and complication, this is what matters. You, us. The fact that I'd rather drink bad tea in your apartment than sit alone in my office. It's not bad tea. It's a little bad. I laughed against his shoulder, then leave. Never. Around 2 a.m., he finally headed home, kissing me at the door like he was memorizing the taste, the feel, the particular warmth of this moment before we returned to the world that wanted to use it against us. Alone again, I checked my personal phone. A text from an unknown number. Ask yourself what Sorrentino isn't telling you. About his father, about Reggio, about the real reason he needs you close. A friend. I stared at the message, deleted it, but the words stayed, sinking in like ink in water, spreading doubts I didn't want to examine. What wasn't Dante telling me? And how much of what he had told me was complete truth versus carefully edited narrative designed to make me trust him, need him, stay close despite the dangers? I didn't know, and that uncertainty felt like the first crack in a foundation I'd thought was solid. Tomorrow, I'd ask him. Tonight, I'd pretend I hadn't seen the message, hadn't felt the doubt creep in, hadn't started wondering if the man I was falling for was exactly who he said he was, or a more complicated truth I hadn't yet learned to translate. I fell asleep with my work phone clutched in one hand, my personal phone face down on the nightstand, and the particular exhaustion that comes from learning that safety is always temporary, and trust is always a risk you can't fully calculate until it's already too late. The morning arrived gray and reluctant, matching my mood. I dreamed of my mother fragments, nothing complete, and woken with the particular ache of missing someone who'd been gone too long to remember clearly. I dressed carefully, checking the lobby before leaving. The security was there, nodding as I passed. On the ride to Dante's office, I reread the anonymous text 5 times, trying to decide whether to mention it. Maria intercepted me in the foyer. He's on a conference call, Berlin, should be done in 10, coffee. We sat in the break room, expensive espresso machine humming. Maria studied me with her usual sharp assessment. You look tired. Late night, Marco Rinaldi showed up at my building. I heard Mr. Sorrentino was, she paused, displeased. That's one word for it. The security will stay until this settles. But Serafina, Maria leaned forward. You should know something. Rinaldi's approach wasn't random. Someone told him where you live, what your schedule is, when you'd be vulnerable. That suggests either a leak or someone with access to that information deliberately fed it to him. My stomach tightened. Who has access? Within our organization, me, Mr. Sorrentino, the driver, a few others. Maria's expression was carefully neutral. But your address is also on employment documents, emergency contacts. It's not perfectly secured. You think someone inside is compromised. I think someone wants to create distrust and fear. Whether that's through actual compromise or just strategic pressure, I don't know yet. She sipped her espresso. In the meantime, be careful. Trust no one completely, not even me. It was a strange kindness, that warning. I nodded. Noted. Dante emerged from his office looking exhausted but determined. When he saw me, some tension left his shoulders. Good morning. Berlin was productive. They're not spooked by the audit, which is promising. We spent the morning reviewing documents, preparing for a meeting with lawyers who specialized in regulatory compliance. Around noon, Dante's father's old associate, a man named Giovanni, late 70s, dignified, arrived unannounced. I heard about the audit, Giovanni said without preamble, and about Carlo's tantrum. I wanted to offer perspective. We sat in Dante's office, me taking notes because that was apparently my role even in conversations that predated my involvement. Giovanni spoke carefully, choosing each word. Your father faced similar situations, rivals using institutions as weapons when they couldn't win through traditional means. His approach was always the same: absolute transparency where possible, strategic opacity where necessary, and patience while enemies made mistakes. I'm trying to be more legitimate than my father was, Dante said. I know, and he'd be proud of that, but legitimacy doesn't mean vulnerability. You can be clean without being naive. Giovanni glanced at me. This is Elena Bianch's granddaughter, yes. Dante nodded. Serafina Morti, she works with me now. Elena was remarkable, sharp, brave, practical. Giovanni smiled faintly. She saw through your father immediately, knew exactly what he was, helped him anyway because it was the right thing in that moment. Not everyone has that clarity. His expression turned serious. The debt your father owed her was real, but don't let old debts distort new relationships. This girl, he gestured toward me. She's her own person. Honor her for who she is, not who her grandmother was. I understand that. Do you? Because from outside, it looks like you're building something that serves both your strategic needs and your emotional wants, and those things rarely align perfectly without consequence. The words hung there, uncomfortable and accurate. After Giovanni left, Dante stood at the window for long minutes. He's not wrong, he said finally. I brought you into this because you were useful: language skills, cultural knowledge, the value of being underestimated. But somewhere along the way, it became personal, and I don't know if I can honestly separate the two anymore. I joined him at the window. Then don't. Acknowledge that it's complicated, that professional and personal overlap, but don't lie about the motivations to yourself or to me. I care about you, genuinely, not because of your grandmother or strategic value, because of you, who you are, how you think, the way you see through people's performances to what's underneath. He turned to me. But I can't deny that having you close also serves my purposes professionally. Is that honest enough? It's a start. I pulled out my personal phone, showed him the anonymous text. But there's something else. I got this last night. He read it, his expression darkening. Who sent this? Unknown number. Could be Carlo, could be Rinaldi, could be someone else entirely trying to create doubt. Or it could be someone who knows something real. Dante sat at his desk, suddenly looking older, tired. What do you want to know? About my father, about Reggio, about why I really need you. The truth, all of it. He nodded slowly. My father didn't just have business in Reggio. He had a serious relationship there, a woman he loved before he married my mother. Her name was Chiara. She died in 1975 in an accident that probably wasn't an accident. Someone sent a message to my father by killing someone he cared about. My breath caught, and my grandmother helped him afterward, got him out of Reggio before he could retaliate and make everything worse. She saved him twice, once from the ambush, once from his own rage. Dante looked directly at me. So yes, the debt is real, but Serafina, you're not Chiara. You're not a replacement or a correction or my father's unfinished business. You're someone I chose independent of any history. Are you sure? Because from here, it looks like maybe you're trying to rewrite your father's story. Save the granddaughter of the woman who saved him. Make the ending come out differently this time. The silence stretched painful. When Dante spoke, his voice was raw. Maybe there's some of that. I can't promise my psychology is perfectly clean. But I know that when I'm with you, I'm not thinking about my father. I'm thinking about you, what you said, how you see things, whether you're safe. That's not history. That's present tense. I wanted to believe him. Most of me did. But the doubt had taken root, and doubt doesn't disappear just because someone offers compelling explanations. I need time, I said, to think about this, about what's real and what's me getting pulled into someone else's narrative. Pain flashed across his face, but he nodded. Take the time, take space if you need it. But Serafina, he stood, crossed to me. Whatever you decide about us personally, please stay safe. The security, the precautions, the professional partnership if nothing else. Let me protect you even if you can't trust my motivations. I can manage that. He kissed my forehead, gentle, careful, already grieving something that might be ending. I'll have Maria take you home. We'll postpone tomorrow's meeting. Give you breathing room. In the car, Maria said nothing. At my building, she handed me a card. Private security line. Call if anything feels wrong. Anything. Upstairs, I sat at my kitchen table and tried to untangle truth from need, reality from story. My phone buzzed. Nana Alina's hospice. I answered, already bracing. Ms. Morty, you should come. Soon. She's declining faster than expected. I grabbed my coat, my bag, my breaking heart, and went to say goodbye to the woman who'd saved Dante's father, who'd warned me about leverage and boundaries, who'd seen this complication coming and loved me enough to let me walk into it anyway. The hospice room smelled like antiseptic and dying. Nana Alina lay so still I thought I'd arrived too late, but her eyes opened when I took her hand. Cara, her voice was barely there. You look like your heart's broken. Working on it. Dante. And me, and history, and not being sure what's real versus what's pattern repetition. I blinked back tears. You warned me. I should have listened better. No, she squeezed my hand with surprising strength. You should have lived, tried, risked. That's always right, even when it hurts. She breathed carefully. Listen, what I told you about Salvatore, about helping him escape, was true, but incomplete. Nana. Hush, dying women get to confess. She smiled faintly. I loved him, Salvatore, briefly, impossibly. He loved Chiara, his Reggio woman, but after she died, he turned to me for comfort. We had 3 weeks. Then he married someone appropriate and I married your grandfather and we both pretended those weeks didn't happen. She closed her eyes. So yes, he owed me a debt. But I owed him too, for showing me what love could feel like before I settled into something safer. My throat closed. Why are you telling me this? Because Dante isn't repeating his father's story. You are repeating mine, falling for a Sorrentino man who's complicated and dangerous and probably not smart to love but impossible not to try loving anyway. She pulled me closer. So try, Cara. Love him if you can, but keep enough back to survive if it doesn't work. That's the balance. Risk everything except the part that keeps you whole. She fell asleep mid-sentence. The nurse said she'd likely wake again, but we were in the final phase. hours, maybe a day. I stayed, held her hand, watched her breathe, and somewhere around midnight, with the hospice quiet except for machines and distant footsteps, I felt the tether that had anchored me my entire life begin to fray, preparing to let go. My work phone buzzed. "Dante, I know you need space, but I also know your grandmother's declining. I'm here if you need me. No expectations, just presence if you want it, D." I stared at the message for long minutes, then typed, "Room 347, St. Joseph's if you meant it." He arrived 20 minutes later, still in his suit, carrying 2 coffees and a bag from the deli near my apartment. He didn't try to touch me, didn't ask questions, just settled into the second chair and existed there, present, patient, waiting. Around 3 a.m., Nana Elena woke briefly, saw Dante, smiled. "You came." "Of course, Signora." "Take care of her, better than your father took care of Chiara, better than he took care of me." Her eyes closed again. "Promise an old woman." "I promise." She slept. We stayed. And in that quiet room, surrounded by the machinery of careful dying, something shifted between us. Not resolution, not complete trust, but willingness to try despite the complications, despite the history, despite every smart reason to walk away. At dawn, Nana Elena Bianchi took one more careful breath and didn't take another. The nurse confirmed what we already knew. Papers were signed, arrangements made, rituals begun. I sat frozen in the chair, unable to cry, unable to move, unable to process that the woman who'd raised me and protected me and warned me and loved me was gone. Dante knelt beside me, took my cold hands in his warm ones. "Serafina, let me help, please. I don't know what I need." "Then let me guess. Clothes for the funeral, flowers, food for people who'll visit, somewhere quiet to fall apart when you're ready. I can arrange all of that." I nodded, mute. He made calls to Maria, to the funeral home, to someone who handled logistics I couldn't begin to contemplate. Within hours, my grandmother's body was moved to a proper facility. Arrangements were made for a service, small, tasteful in the Catholic tradition she'd maintained despite decades of skepticism. Dante took me to his apartment. Not the office, not a hotel, but his actual home. A penthouse I hadn't seen before, with floor-to-ceiling windows and carefully curated art. And a guest room he deposited me in with instructions to sleep or cry or rage as needed. I did all 3 in cycles, while the city went on below and Dante existed somewhere on the other side of the door, managing the logistics of death because I couldn't. When I emerged, hours later, he sat at his kitchen island with a tablet and coffee, coordinating details. He looked up when I appeared. "The service is scheduled for Wednesday. I've contacted the people who should be invited, your grandmother's friends from the Italian community, a few business associates who knew her history. If there's anyone else." "How do you know who to invite?" Maria did research, found her address book in the hospice room, cross-referenced names. "We're being thorough but not invasive." He stood cross to me. "Coffee, food, silence." All 3. He made eggs, simple, perfect, while I drank coffee and tried to remember how to exist in a world without Nana Elena's sharp observations and warnings and love. The eggs tasted like nothing, but I ate them anyway because Dante had made them, and some small part of me recognized the care in the gesture. "I'm sorry," I said finally, "for doubting you, for letting that anonymous text get in my head." "Don't apologize. Doubt was rational. I gave you reasons to question motivations." He sat across from me. "But Serafina, however we started, whatever complicated history brought us together, what I feel now is real, present tense, not my father's story, ours." I reached across the table, laced my fingers through his. "I want to believe that." "Then believe it, or don't yet, take time. But either way, I'm here. For the funeral, for whatever comes after, for as long as you'll let me stay." We sat like that, holding hands across expensive granite, while the sun set over a city that didn't care about our grief or our complications, or the ways love and history got tangled together into something neither clean nor simple, but somehow, impossibly real. The funeral happened on a Wednesday that felt borrowed from November, cold, gray, merciless. The service was held in the small Catholic church where Nana Elena had attended Mass sporadically, more out of cultural habit than conviction. The priest spoke in careful Italian about eternal rest and the comfort of faith, words that felt both appropriate and insufficient. Dante stood beside me throughout, his presence steady. His world had turned out Maria, Giovanni, even Dr. Graff, the Swiss specialist. But the front pews were filled with Nana Elena's friends, the Italian women who'd formed their own community in this cold northern city, who'd shared recipes and memories and the particular loneliness of being permanent foreigners. One of them, Mrs. Castellano, no relation to the shipping magnate, hugged me after the service. "Your grandmother was fierce," she said in Calabrese. "She never forgot where she came from, never let America make her small. You have her spirit." I wanted to believe that, wanted to think I'd inherited her